On what was supposed to be a joyous day filled with love, renewal, and second chances, Port Charles was instead swallowed by a thick fog of suspicion, betrayal, and emotional landmines. The wedding of Drew and Willow had been promoted as a sign of new beginnings, a fresh chapter for two people who had endured unspeakable loss. But behind the well-dressed smiles and polished table settings, dark truths lingered, and old wounds reopened in full force. What unfolded was not a ceremony of unity, but a collision of unresolved tensions that left everyone in its wake questioning who they could trust. Sonny, always aware of the shifting power currents in Port Charles, found himself engaged in a tense conversation with Marco, recently released from custody and clearly still carrying the weight of what happened to his mother. Sonny tried to maintain control, offering what he framed as a warning rather than a threat: "Stay away from Jen Sidwell's operations, and there won't be trouble." But Marco, driven by a thirst for justice or perhaps vengeance, did not seem inclined to cooperate. The calm, measured voice Sonny used only deepened Marco's resentment, as if Sonny expected gratitude for leniency rather than consequences for past crimes. This meeting wasn't a truce, it was a reckoning delayed. Marco left without explicitly declaring his next move, but the intensity in his eyes said it all. Sonny had made an enemy that wouldn't be placated by empty reassurances. Meanwhile, the long-anticipated wedding between Willow and Drew began to unravel long before vows could be exchanged. Drew, blinded by his own optimism, clung tightly to a fantasy he had been scripting for months. He told Scout they would be a family now, solid, unbreakable, finally free from past shadows. But outside the nursery tale Drew was spinning, reality had sharpened its claws. Curtis, ever the cautious observer, had planted seeds of doubt in Willow's mind, hinting at Nina's proximity to Drew with more than innocent concern. And those seeds bore fruit faster than anyone anticipated. When Willow confronted Nina, it wasn't in private or in a hushed whisper. It was raw, exposed, and accusatory, right in the middle of the chaos surrounding her big day. Nina, stunned by the question and perhaps not entirely guiltless, hesitated too long. That silence screamed louder than any denial could. Willow's trust shattered in real time, and while the room around her continued to prepare for a ceremony, she stood frozen in place, blindsided by the realization that the man waiting at the altar might not be the man she thought she knew. The quiet heartbreak in her eyes wasn't just about Drew's possible betrayal. It was about the pattern repeating itself. Men she trusted hiding behind masks, women she tried to forgive manipulating her from the sidelines. The tension was exacerbated by the presence of Lucy, always a lightning rod for drama. She extended a surprise invitation to Sidwell, a gesture that might have seemed harmless on the surface. But the implications were anything but. Lucy, torn between her admiration for Sidwell and her history with Sonny, was walking a fine line. During her interaction with Sidwell, he mentioned the idea of peaceful coexistence, an ironic term considering the brewing storm. While Lucy hoped to keep all her relationships intact, her actions only fueled more speculation. Why was she entertaining Sidwell's company at such a volatile time? Was it strategic networking, or had she unknowingly aligned herself with someone dangerous? Sidwell himself remained an enigmatic figure, outwardly calm but internally calculating. His potential appearance at the wedding carried multiple meanings. Was he simply Lucy's guest, or did he have a broader agenda? Perhaps he sought to study Sunny's next moves, or maybe the wedding was the perfect cover for an entirely separate scheme. Regardless, his looming presence in the background intensified the unease rippling through every conversation that day. Port Charles was no stranger to power players circling each other like sharks, but this time the water was especially murky. Amid all this, Drew remained blissfully unaware of the crumbling facade around him. He rehearsed his vows, greeted guests, and smiled for the cameras, while his bride-to-be quietly unraveled. Willow, caught between heartbreak and obligation, considered her next move. Would she confront Drew directly? Would she walk away from the altar, from the life she thought she wanted? Or would she, in a moment of emotional compromise, forgive him, not because she believed him, but because she needed to believe in something? And if she forgave Drew, would that come at the cost of vilifying Nina? It seemed easier to blame the outsider than face the betrayal from within. This moral dilemma played out internally for Willow as she sat in the bridal suite, bouquet in hand, memories flashing like lightning strikes. Michael's warmth, Wiley's laughter, the pain of losing time with both, and the promise of a new beginning with Drew. But beginnings built on shaky truths have a tendency to collapse. If she said, "I do," what exactly was she agreeing to? A fresh start or a facade wrapped in satin and silk? Back at the church, the guests were growing restless. Nina's composure had cracked, and even those who once believed in her redemption arc began to murmur about her role in this latest storm. Curtis, who had tried to sound the alarm, now watched as the pieces fell into place, too late to stop the collapse, too early to predict who would be standing when the dust settled. Sunny, still caught in his separate war with Marco and Sidwell, was unaware that the emotional battlefield had just opened a new front inside the chapel. As the hour of the ceremony approached, everyone was holding their breath. Lucy kept checking the door for Sidwell's arrival. Nina attempted to justify her silence, Curtis stood guard like a sentry, and Drew waited alone at the altar. Then, finally, Willow entered, not with confidence or grace, but with the weight of heartbreak stitched into her gown. The room stood in silence as she approached Drew. There were no smiles, no radiant joy, only an undercurrent of fear and the sound of dreams fraying at the edges. Willow did not speak right away. When the officiant asked the question that should have sealed their fate, the pause that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to her, and in that moment, Port Charles held its collective breath. Would she forgive? Would she fight? Would she flee? The answer, like everything in Port Charles, was not simple. Willow stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute, and what she said next would change the course of multiple lives, not just hers and Drew's, but Nina's, Sunny's, and even Sidwell's. Because the truths that exploded on this day would not be confined to the chapel. They would spill outward, infecting every corner of Port Charles with consequences no one could contain. And outside, in the distance, Marco watched from the shadows, calculating his next move. The day may have been meant for vows and promises, but what it delivered was a declaration of war. Not just between lovers, but between ideologies, between families, between loyalties twisted by time and ambition. The wedding that should have healed old wounds instead opened new ones. And in true General Hospital fashion, the fallout was just beginning.